Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Enterprise Minds. We got the whole crew here, which is awesome. We are gonna have an interesting episode today. I think I'm looking forward to this discussion. A little bit of news, a little bit of personal projects, a little bit of personal conflict, and therapy therein. So, if that doesn't get you excited, let's talk about accidentally writing a research paper. Alex, off to you.
Okay, we can start with that one. So go for that one. All right. Long story short, basically, I was playing a card game on vacation with my brother-in-law, and he was wondering the probability of one thing versus the other. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting question. I don't know. We talked about it for like 2 seconds. And then later that night, I was like, hey, Claude, what's the difference? Like, tell me the probabilities between all these different things for this given card game, like the outcomes. And it reported back two things that I thought were interesting. And the first was there is no existing research on this. And the game is called Phase 10. It turns out it's the second most popular card game for sales after Uno. So I never knew about it before my in-laws started playing it. So I thought it was some random old game. Turns out it's
No, I
not.
love Phase 10. It's a great game.
I've never done it.
It's at least to David. All right. Hopefully to some people. They're all staring at their phones being like, of course, Alex, of course we know this. But trying to figure out the probability of the different phases is tricky. And apparently that's what Claude said is that there is no existing data set, which I thought was interesting. The second thing is it said, because I was using Fable, it ran 3,500 Monte Carlo simulations, which basically means it tried to, virtually deal the deck and see what happened. And then it gave me probabilities. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. So the next day on the long drive home, I was wondering like, hey, there's a lot of non-available data online from random papers and the rest. There's scientific databases that you can post stuff. Should this be posted? Like, maybe that's useful. I said it could, but I was like, well, can I write a research paper on this? So I have a research paper. It's out there. It ran 7.5 million simulations for 2, 4, and 6 players, along with some other things, including the wild cards, skip cards, and stuff. So it ends up being a lot of simulations, 7.5 million in total. But the data is live. I have a DIO, like a number on it, which is the same thing if you had a dissertation, you'd get one of those too. I have a research ID now, so people can find my ORCID, my researcher ID as well now. And I submitted it to a publication who I guess they're taking a look at it now, but then I'll see in a couple of weeks. If not, I'll go to the next publication. So crazy. Just kind of a fun, random, creative project. And yeah, something a little bit different. I'm doing other stuff like that too. In the last week, that was one thing, but the other one was I found an integer set, so a set of random numbers that hasn't been found before. So I submitted that one too. So I got credit for that one too. So I am now, versus last week, marketer. Now I am apparently a mathematician and researcher. So all thanks to Fable. So that brings us to our next question of attribution.
Wait, hang on. This is so cool, Alex.
Yeah, no, it's kind of fun.
This is awesome. I want to hear more about your interactions with Fable. Like, how much probing did you have to do, or was it similar to the experience you have with other ones, where it's just like, oh, here's an idea, you want to run with this, and you're like, yeah, let's run with that. Like, what did you find distinct about Fable versus some of the other models you've been using?
Yeah.
Tell us about how you found a new integer. And
Sure.
Also just a side note that you should definitely send your Phase 10 research to a friend of ours who's very excited about statistics to see what he has to say. Yes.
Oh, that'd be fun. Considering his AI stances as well. It'd be fun to talk about that one too.
Is this the
yeah, so I use all the different models that are out there, including the various ones from Gemini, the various ones from ChatGPT, all the stuff that's available through Copilot. I haven't played around with the meta ones yet or any of the Chinese-based ones yet. So I'm a little gapped on some of those. I've tried some of them in the past. They just never were much really in comparison to the other kind of frontier models. So maybe that's changed. Meta, I know, has been doing some really aggressive work on theirs, so maybe that's going to change soon too. But so that's kind of like just a quick, that's what I know kind of basis. Fable is fantastic, to be honest. It has a lot of safeguards pre-built into it. So if you ask it even just the barest of a biology question, like, I don't know, like identify this, what kind of bird this feather could have come from, it will be like, nope, safeguard, can't do it. And I'll switch you down to Opus. It is very, very finicky on that, but that's because there was concerns of bioterrorism, like ingredient creation and stuff like that. So they put a lot of safeguards on that one. So that model can be a little particular to use because you get kicked down to Opus 4.8 pretty frequently, depending on what you're working on. With phase 10, that was totally fine. I was able to make the whole paper. I was good with that. I started trying to do some other projects and it was absolutely was like, won't do it. The big difference, in short, that I found with Fable versus prior models was I now feel like I have an online access to a person who is a researcher at my beck and call, basically. That is a huge step change difference than Opus 4.8, which is good. And it can think of things more complete. A lot of the ChatGPT models don't. They'll give you what I consider like the fast answer. Like if someone researched it for 5 minutes or clicked on the first 3 listings on Google and they summarized an answer, that's the kind of answer that ChatGPT gives you frequently. To the point even where I found ChatGPT in the last week using the thinking model, the kind of higher level models and stuff like that. I asked it for a list of federal departments by employee size, and it gave me a list, and one of them was listed twice. Like, so that's just an amateur mistake. Like, it's small, it's, you know, easy to be like whatever and keep on going, but it was missing basic things. Like there were commonalities between a bunch of them that should have been stated, considering my goal that I had already stated to it. It's just ChatGPT is one that I use if I run out of credits with Claude, basically. And then I always copy and paste the work back to Claude once I have credits again and saying, critique this from ChatGPT, which if you, by the way, if you say to any of these models, there's a fun paper out there on this. If you say to Claude that this is something from Claude, it will be a lot softer. If you say to Claude, this is from ChatGPT, it will be much more critical. So depending on how you want it to take that information in, you know, you can always phrase it however you like. It's a funny paper. There's a lot of weird things that AI agents do.
I would love to see the difference of, you know, I write something and get Claude's feedback on it with Claude thinking it's me.
Right.
And then I write something and say, this is ChatGPT writing it, critique this, and like what the difference is.
I feel like, hey, that's mean. This is my writing. Yeah, but Fable was amazing because it was, instead of ChatGPT, which is kind of giving you that quick research summary. The Opus models were good in that they'll give you an answer plus a bit more. So it will kind of understand a little bit more of your goal. It might push back even before it starts and saying like, you're talking about 2 different things here. Like, do you want this or do you want that?
Which I so appreciate. Yes.
I do too, because there's a lot of these kind of questions, especially projects like this that are very open-ended. You know, it's not really clear what the end goal will be. I mean, I went through multiple iterations, even the short story that I talked about of, you know, what my endpoint was supposed to be. So that kind of back and forth is really, really helpful, but also a completeness of answer that not just says, here's the answer to your question, the factoid kind of thing, which is the ChatGPT version. Instead, it's a bit more of, okay, here's what you wanted, and then here's where it can go. And those are the pieces of information you need to know about that step. What I found with Gemini is it loves to answer a follow-up question, or it loves to ask a follow-up question. And as you ask it things, it will come up with a follow-up question, which sometimes not completely relevant at all.
Yes.
But it's just trying to continue a conversation. It's just like a chatbot, you know, which there's been chatbots for decades now at this point. And that just try to get you to keep interacting. And that seems to be its goal. ChatGPT seems to be like speed, and then Claude seems to be completeness. So.
And what I've mostly been using Opus over the last, we'll call it 2 weeks in particular.
Yeah.
And I have also noticed that where I will give it I'll ask a question or say, help me think through this. And it will start off by first clarifying what it is I'm asking, or perhaps saying, like, what if we think about it this different way, and then answer that question. And by and large, the way that it's rephrasing or clarifying does indeed get to what I was trying to get to, but perhaps couldn't. And I'm often using it in the context of a project. And so
Sure.
I found it super useful, or it'll be like, you were exploring this thing. It's assuming we're exploring a similar train of thought. Let's build off of that and reference it. And then the thing I worry about with that, though, is how much of an information bubble am I putting myself in? And
Yes.
how do I check against that, right? Because if it's based
Yes.
out from previous conversations and it's like we created a shared understanding here, we're building off of that. How much am I in my own very solid bubble so that when I talk to somebody else, they're like, what on earth are you talking about? Because I only have the shared understanding with Claude. I don't have it with other people. And this might be very speculative. And especially when I'm working in sort of trying to better understand an area I don't know, it's hard to know like what speculation, what are the probabilities of different outcomes versus, yes, this is sort of known and proven.
Yeah. I've run into a similar thing with projects of it takes prior chats and it starts to really narrow down too much to the point where
Yeah.
I'll copy and paste a prompt to an incognito chat and ask it again via that, just to compare and contrast the responses to see if like the creativity basically is being reduced with it. Or restating the goals of like, okay, for this response, I don't want the prior goals. My goals now are these things in this order, or like rank it by this, critique it with this in mind, or something like that, just to kind of keep trying to break it out of those cycles where it starts to really narrow in a lot. As for information that you know versus, IRL, the real life, I don't know. That's a tough one. I haven't run into that too much lately, just because I've been staying to the stuff I know, or barely outside of it. But yeah,
Yeah, I've been finding, at least for me, with between the three of them, Alex, you're right on point with Claude is a great kind of thought partner. Ruthie, same thing. I really like the fact that it pushes back and I can just have kind of more of a general conversation with it. Because I find my outputs are better when I don't type, actually, because then I can just go the speed of my brain. I'm using Gemini in more of the day-to-day random questions.
yeah,
Yeah.
Like I had to measure my front door for a storm door the other day, and it's one of those things where it's like I'm a close enough kind of person, but I know that doesn't help when you're trying to build something. So I took I took the tape measure and I put on Gemini Live, and I just said, this is what I think it is for this storm door measure. Is that right, or am I reading this wrong?
Yes.
Like, here's the
All
model.
all the
important.
DIY house stuff, I usually start with Gemini. I'll check with
Absolutely.
Claude, but I'll usually start with Gemini.
Do you do the
Yeah.
same thing where it's Gemini Live, Ruthie?
Yeah.
I have not used Gemini Live. I just say, this is
Okay.
the project I'm trying to do. I know nothing. Tell
Mhm.
me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I use the chat functionality like really frequently. The voice functionality with ChatGPT was actually pretty good, but the way I was recording it for projects and stuff was messy in the past. And then
Mhm.
Claude, I even had entire sessions get like deleted or missed.
Yeah.
It would type it all out and then it would just like not know about it. And if you refreshed, it was gone. Like there were some weird bugs. So
Mhm.
which literally is like, a handful of uses over time. So I gotta get more time on it to really get a good opinion. But that's awesome, Dave. Like that's a really cool idea. Like using the live camera, being like,
Yeah.
this, what is
Read
this?
this tape measure. This is the door I want to buy.
Yeah,
Tell me if I'm okay, because I think
yeah,
I am, but I don't know, and I don't enjoy this kind of work. So let's just get
yeah,
it done.
yeah. No, that's awesome. I mean, that's really smart too.
So,
Good to have those second opinions.
yeah, well, and then they sent somebody out to measure it anyway. So I'm like, cool, glad I bothered.
Oh man, better than a window shade that I ordered a little bit too precise. It's like hard to pull down now because it literally fills side to side perfectly. So if you angle it at all, it's like hard to pull. It's like I should have
Yes.
known, which I didn't, that window shades are a little bit different the way that they're measured because of that. There's a
Yes.
difference there. But I
Yes.
didn't know that. So when it said, measure it, I measured it, which it's just, Dave, that's a really smart usage, because if I had used a tool like that, it would have said this, but in this case, you don't do that. Or with a
Yes.
door, you do. I
Right.
don't know the difference. All right.
Right. Yeah, I'm
This
not about
reminds
to know the
me
difference.
Mm-hmm.
signs of the sort of adoption curve. My aunt is currently using ChatGPT to help her redesign her fireplace like overlay. So
Cool.
she's got sort of a brick fireplace and she has taken a picture of it, and then she gets 5 a day, she tells me, for ChatGPT to give her new alternates of like, here's manipulation of the image of how it would look with this different effect, this different effect. And I go, okay, that's an important part of the adoption curve,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
that my aunt is using it for something like this. And I wouldn't, she's not particularly technically savvy, but she's not also behind the times. And it
Yeah.
goes, okay, this is now part of more and more people's lives.
So along those lines, my dad, who's 71 retiree, um, he is part of the MG North American MG Club, right? So old British sports cars, teeny tiny little things like
Yeah.
basically real life Hot Wheel cars. Um, they he is the editor of the MG Gazette as part of his retirement. So he writes little articles for any of the MG enthusiasts. And he was recently going to research MG as a company and in the context of innovation, like how innovative has MG been over the years, which most people in the US probably don't know MG unless you're like a total, greasehead, right? Um, but he started using ChatGPT and he started paying for it. And he only had to write his little article, but because he's an English teacher and an academic, he started doing deep research on it. And now he has basically an outline for a 500-page book that he's very strongly considering writing.
500-page. Okay.
Yeah. And he's like, yeah, I just spun this up in an afternoon. This is amazing. And I'm like, wow, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. You went from kind of putzing around with it to totally next level. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Should
That's
publish it.
really cool.
Mm-hmm.
He should go talk to Fable, it sounds like, because I feel
Yeah.
like he's not going to get dinged by Fable for talking about cars. And sounds like
No,
Alex
that
has
was
had
totally
great
fine.
success publishing already. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And once I told him about Google's Notebook LM, the
Yeah, I was
academic
about to
in
say.
him got so excited because he's like,
oh,
yeah, it outlined it in Chicago style with footnotes, and I didn't have to putz around with that. This is amazing.
Sir, your standards are above things I would even not even know about.
Yeah. So
that's so cool.
it is
Which
cool
brings
the
us to
use
AI
cases. Yeah.
citations.
Yeah.
How
That
will
is a
he
great,
might be
yes.
an expert to bring on the show. The question before the court is, how do you cite AI?
Yeah. This is a really, I don't know, I've been struggling with this one. And I know this has come up kind of as a mini topic a few times during prior episodes.
Mm-hmm.
So it'd be cool to get the three of us kind of our opinion on it.
Yeah.
Basically is, how do you reference the work that you've created with AI? Are you giving credit to it? Are you kind of hiding behind it, saying like AI created this? I don't know if it's any good. Like kind of like this is an early draft kind of caveat. Or are you like, this isn't something that I feel, responsible for. This thing created it. I didn't. In the case of, it was interesting the way that I had to put a disclaimer in that research paper, of course, because it
Mm-hmm.
ran the data, and while I was able to run it a few times and have the Python and the raw data and everything else files, it still it ran it, right?
Right.
So at the end there is a disclaimer paragraph that says that basically that I directed it and I'm responsible for it and that it did the research work, right? And I thought that was kind of an interesting thing because we've talked in the past of like feeling almost like a curator where you're commissioning an artwork that it created, right? Because you put in a prompt, you did, you know, 0.1% of the work and it did 99% of the work and you got this cool looking image at the end of it. And it's like, yeah, maybe commissioning it because you went to you know, an artist and asked for it to be done because you didn't create it. But at the same time, on the reverse, if you take a photo, do you credit your camera or do you say I took this picture when I was on vacation? Right? So why does the tool now get more credit than the tool before?
Because people anthropomorphize AI way stronger than a camera.
Keep going, Dave.
So I've struggled with this too, because having been someone who has outsourced work to people, on the one hand, I'm responsible for creating the project, outlining it, scoping it so that they're capable of doing it. So I definitely take ownership of that. But then once you hand it off to them, I mean, it's kind of their thing, right? I mean, if you were, let's just assume a human right now. You hand it off to a human, they go, they do it, they're responsible for the output. And then as the person who commissioned it, you have to check whether or not it meets standards, right? Especially in the agency days, right? Like, all right, the client wants this. Did you execute that? Or, do we have to quick turn this around to make it way better? Those are the conversations that we're used to having. When it comes to AI, I think it's a very similar thing where if you're prompting in it's not necessarily the right way, but the way that allows you to have it be more personalized to you, and it's really methodical, and here's the scope of what I'm trying to do. Here are the things you should know. Here are the players. Here's what would be considered good output. Here's something that would be considered bad output, yada, 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 yada. Right. I mean, you get in those really long prompts.
Yes.
So you're definitely responsible for that. But that output, yeah, I mean, that is where it's weird. But then, Ruthie, based on what you said to me the other week, this is what had me in this thought where I'm not interested in reading somebody else's AI output. Right? But how much different is that from the actual, if somebody else put together a research paper, how much different is that, really, honestly? If you're just curating sources and putting together some spin on it of these 5 sources have said this, therefore the logical conclusion is, X. I don't, that's not very far off from that intern thing for me.
I definitely see some distance there in terms of the type of output that you'll get is much more of like, so for the given industry or niche industry that I work in, there's a lot of purchasable papers that I can get on market research, market demand, stuff like that, right? And I kind of know when I'm getting a paper like that it's going to be generic. It's going to say kind of their own use of terms and the like that they've defined themselves. It's going to cover a lot of topics which are outside the scope of necessarily what I'm interested in. And it's going to mean that I'm going to sort through, 30 to 50 pages to kind of find the stuff that I'm interested in and get the pieces that I want out of it.
Right.
If I ask a person about a specific goal in mind and after it, what they present back typically is more of an argument. Instead of just here's a reference material piece. Instead, it's much more, here's a defined piece that answers your question, yes or no, or aggressively yes, aggressively no, or weakly yes, weakly no. That kind of a thing, right? That's more of that kind of the output gets created much more personal. And then it's also a little bit shorter, more concise, and kind of hits the points that matter, right? If you're looking for general reference, though, once you hit that level, maybe there isn't a difference. If you're doing that in between piece, which it's much more like the market research piece, then it hits a line between this is going to be more generalized or this is going to be more specific. And typically with the AI outputs, they're very generic.
Right.
So it's not as useful reading as if someone else wrote it, because someone else would have put their spin on it after consuming the material. Their opinion shows up, and then they wrote down their opinion plus the research, right? And that opinion is the thing that I care about. The research is,
Yes.
I'll find it later. Oh,
Yeah, I think this is such a interesting line of thought. So, a few thoughts. The first one is, I think we're currently in the world in which agents and assistants, chatbots are acting on my behalf. We're not quite in a space where we've got autonomous acting ones. So I'm going to set that aside because that might change how I think about these things in the future. But for now, like, to me, if an AI writes something and I email it to you, or I create a Jira story, or I create a PowerPoint presentation, like, I am accountable to everything that goes in to that communication presentation. It's coming from me, even if an AI wrote it. I started out putting in, like, in certain communications, like, part of this was AI generated just because it was sort of new, it was emerging, and I wanted to be transparent about it. I think, at least in my work culture, we've reached the point where it's so ubiquitous that it's just assumed, whereas before it wasn't assumed. And so now you don't even have to put it in because the presumption is like, yes, you worked with AI to write it. And with that, I think there's a difference between I worked with AI to write this thing, and by sending it, I'm putting my stamp on approval, which means I'm going to do the work ahead of time to make sure that it's good and I stand by the things that are in it.
Right.
And what I see happening and what I've seen in my own workplace is not doing the editing, not doing the I'm going to read through and make sure I agree with this. Instead, it's I'm going to move as quick as I possibly can. I'm going to send stuff out, and I'm not even going to worry about the contents of it. And where I really take issue is when I see this with coworkers who put the time and work on the receiver. They said, I couldn't be bothered to take this 70-page presentation and down it to 7 that you actually care about or that are getting to the relevant argument. I'm going to make you do all the effort to sift through the garbage that my AI created. Like, that is not taking ownership of the work that you're doing with AI. So I think there's a cultural component to it. And I was thinking about this research point that Alex, you brought up too, of like the opinion is what you care about, less so the research. And I wonder if in those cases where you're like, I want other people to be on the same page or to be able to have a little background information, if it's better to be like, here's the prompt, or Alex, you've shared, and Dave, I think you have as well. Hey, here's the starter conversation I had with ChatGPT, but now you can go continue that conversation, which then puts the onus in my court to be able to have the conversation. It gives me agency versus having to read your conversation, which frankly isn't that interesting.
Right.
Yeah, the different learning styles there too. That's an interesting point. Kind of found that with quite a few people, like written down information, and maybe also in the method that that I prefer reading things is significantly different than the way that they'll ever take in the information. Like I had an old boss that it was a slide with 3 bullet points. If you hit 5, you probably were needing another meeting with her. Like that was it. You want to write an email? That's pointless. You want to write a Teams message? That's pointless. She wanted a slide, 1 slide, 3 bullet points. That's the most. And they better be short. Like, but I found with her, what really resonated was slides that did builds. So even if I had a graph, I would present, just the XY axis and talk about that. And then we would add in the bars or the line, and then we talk about where the point is, and then we put like a arrow or a star at the point that we care about, and then talk about why this matters. Because I knew also if I threw a chart, she would gloss over it, and she usually got distracted by something else on her computer or phone or something like that real quick. So different people, that's kind of an interesting point though with the AI tools of being able to hand off. That's a really cool thing, because I'm sure what she would have preferred was, instead of me writing a lengthy email, which to me makes sense, she would have preferred a summary of it or an image-based version of it that she can consume a lot faster versus me and text I can consume a lot faster, right? Which is totally fair that we have different styles. So interesting if the tools can do it.
Well, and there's the interesting point too with a lot of the communication studies is, if you take the same message, but it's delivered by 2 different people, 3 different people, there will be vastly different takeaways.
Oh, true.
So, I mean, this is the same thing where, okay, do you want it the short and snappy? Do you want the video? Do you want, is it a heavier subject? So do you need more authority? So then do you lean toward, some biases towards authority, sure. Or do you not, right? Like one of my favorite assignments. Now, granted, I know nobody's going to go do this, but it would be cool if people did. Go read the CEO letters for the annual reports for publicly traded companies, and then read between the lines and write down everything they're not saying. All right.
Yeah.
Then go take that and compare it to their most recent Glassdoor ratings. And you can start getting a picture of what the culture's like, what's actually happening, what's not actually happening, what the investors might be missing when, you get those rosy colored, 10Ks that are released. It's a fun little experiment.
So Dave, you've done some poetry writing, you've done, have you tried around any of the music tools with AI yet? Where do you see kind of like from the musician standpoint of where credit is due or not due with regards to kind of more art creative work?
Well, the music thing is interesting. The music industry has always been unkind to the artists, and that's fine. That you're getting into it. Like it is what it is. What's interesting now, having started my music career in the aftermath of Napster, when everybody stopped paying for music, right? To where we are now with the streaming services, which is like, I'd kind of rather you steal it instead of, saying you're paying me when it's, a tenth of a penny per stream. Like, so what, now Spotify says it doesn't have to pay you until you reach at least 20,000 streams. Why? Because they own their own platform. So you're just not going to be paid because you're not fitting the algorithm, right? And does anybody bother to like look into this when they're streaming music? No, they just want to stream music. Which great. Consume music. Everybody should, I mean, there's a reason it's there. The business of it is crap and has gotten more crap, because the AI tools have essentially scraped YouTube without permission or other digital libraries, and then created their own thing. And so now, essentially the largest organizations like Universal Music Group or, other record companies like that are cutting deals with the AI so that they get licensures with the AI companies, but all the independent artists don't get that same treatment, right? The independent artists get invited to upload your catalog to the AI tools so that they can then leverage the creativity. But then do you get a royalty for being included in the library? No, you don't. So for me, I have not done anything with AI for my music, aside from I have this weird chord progression. Give me some options. Totally in the chatbot. Because, at least with music, the AI can't listen to what you're doing and then give you suggestions, right? And it can't really look at what you're playing. I mean, maybe if you're doing live mode, I've never tested this, but maybe it could, but it defaults to really standard voicings because the vast majority of content is for, beginner players, right? So if I'm using a jazz chord in a weird way, it's not really going to know what to do with that. So, yeah, I keep music for me, so I don't really use it other than to problem solve the composition stuff if I'm looking for an idea. And then of course I'll try it out, but then I'm like, oh, that was weird. I don't really like that. Um, where I have used it is doing deep research on particular artists and their composition styles and their particular techniques. So that if I wanted to make something like in that style, I now have kind of a blueprint of, how to think about that. With creative writing, it's a lot easier, right? Because I mean, chatbots are built on text and whatever else, but like any of the prompting for any of these things, it's been interesting to really take the creative process and chunk it out into its like individual parts, right? So it's like, okay, I'm in kind of the discovery phase right here. I don't really know what I'm doing. I just need like all the ideas to narrow down to what this thing actually is, right? Then you have the editor role, you have these, other things like with writing. I've found really what's really helpful is what I'm calling like a craft layer, where I just had a conversation with Claude and said, hey, for all of my writing projects, if I tell you I want my name on it, you are not allowed to write a single thing. You're allowed to be an editor, generate an idea for me. But because of the copyright standards, you're not allowed to do anything.
That's a cool layer.
Yeah, well, and then on top of that, because then I can say, hey, you know what? Like, I want this idea out into the world, but I don't really care to go through the 9 months of writing something. So go ahead and do it under a pen name, write the hell out of it. We'll release, self-publish it as an AI thing, right? Now that one, I haven't done that one yet, but it's at least set up in the layer that way. But then I also went through and said, here's the list of my favorite movies. Here's the kind of list of my favorite books. Here's my favorite authors, my favorite poets. Here are my favorite rappers and how they use words and wordplay and, yada, yada. And just an exploration of the craft of language, right? It's like I like Hemingway, but I hate his over masculinity. So like kill that part of it, but recognize the iceberg structure that everybody talks about with Hemingway. I love Billy Collins and Allen Ginsberg and all those guys.
Did you put all that in a notebook LM, or is that like in a markdown file somewhere that it references?
No, that's in a.
Where is that?
Yeah, so I had this whole conversation about style and reference and like, do's and don'ts based on my voice and my preferences. Yeah. And then so that became a markdown file that goes into the instructions. And then just in case, because of the music producer background of mine, I don't trust file storage. So I keep it in like 7 different places, So I have a Word doc version of it. I have it, in Claude. So then it's a reference document every time it goes to say, go through the stuff to say, okay, I'm doing poetry. Therefore I should be doing this with his writing for this particular thing. Then I have one for prose, which is okay. We're working on a creative writing, more, novel type situation. So, all right, great. Blah, 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 blah. And so with these layers and chunking out the working process into the kind of like 5 master prompts, which was an idea I picked up off of a webinar I went to. I think Alex and we talked about this in a previous episode, but I leveraged that plus this craft layer to then take my creative writing capstone from university, which was 8 chapters of a book. And I put the first couple prompts in it, uploaded the thing, and I said, critique it. I know it's young writer, so like you can ignore that stuff because yeah, I know, I get it. But then based on what I prefer now and how I try to write now, let's do this. Let's build out an outline like, the way James Patterson does his outlines, which are these ridiculous 70, 80 page outlines on a legal pad. I said, let's write a scene by scene kind of hit list for the overall, novel structure. And then it took the 50,000 words that I had for the first draft from, 20 years ago, and then started putting all the sections and all the different things. And so now I went and did a 4-hour writing session last weekend, and I was able to rewrite the entire first chapter and most of the second chapter in the new style with these sort of like developed character cards too, to be like, this person would do this person would do that, they wouldn't ever do this, so make sure that you look out for that. So it's been, that part of it's been very cool. It's a lot easier with writing than with music, at least in the way that I've been using.
And it occurs to me, like those character cards, maybe you already do those could be like a markdown file themselves.
They
so
are,
that
yeah.
you've got this constant reference back, which
Yep.
at least for me, I find that super helpful, both because that's one less thing I have to keep track of, but also it just keeps the consistency and accuracy of the responses I'm getting just a little bit more on track.
Yeah, you'll appreciate this, Ruthie. I specifically told it, build out RPG style character cards for all of these things. So it gave me like psychological attributes, it gave me physical attributes, it gave me, all these different things. But then in terms of like troubleshooting, it was interesting because I said, like based on my favorite movies, my favorite books, my favorite whatever, like I'm really struggling with what's at stake in this story. And it's really hard to get going on a new draft for this when I don't understand what the problem is. And that's a really boring book if there's no problems. And so ended up having this whole long conversation of like, okay, yeah, if you mentioned Chekhov, and if you took that approach, then this, or like Dostoevsky, it'll go that, or David Foster Wallace, it'll go this way. And I'm like, okay, but I don't want to be preachy like a lot of Russian literature is. Also, I don't want to be depressing like a lot of Russian literature is, but I do like the high-mindedness of it. So let's, explore that. And, so yeah, that craft layer has been really fun because then it's like you're actually talking to a peer who has the same kind of context, and you could make a random reference to, Vonnegut's unpublished short story from 52. I like this element of it. It's like, oh yeah, that's a good thing. We can include it this way. And like, dang, okay.
Yes.
It's like total nerding and it's awesome. But it is, to your point, like this is why there's an editing process at the end. But that is a very distinct part of the process, right?
Distinct and critical. That's such a cool application on how you take in your process and sort of figure out, okay, how do I apply this, or how do I make this work for me? And now out of it, to your point, like you get a better collaboration partner, and like on its own, off the shelf, you pay, and this might be true, the free version, you pay $20 for Claude, like you already have a collaboration partner, and now you're just making it even more bespoke to work for your process.
And I now have them set up in particular projects so that I can just go in and add to these things, and it has the specific instructions to go through. And it's like I could do co-work for some of this stuff, but that seems like it's too much. Like I think I don't know if you guys have gotten to this point yet, but like the capabilities that are there now, I don't necessarily have a use for all of them yet. Like Claude released design, and then they just released this new scientific thing. It's like, okay, well, I'm not ever going to touch that one, but like the design one could be interesting. But again, I don't have use for that right now, so we'll wait to play with that later. And I'm interested to play with Fable, but to your point, Alex, earlier, like I'm a little wary of the things that they had to do in order to release it. It's like how much of this is actually usable. Like I'm okay with 4.8, Opus 4.8. Like, do I need to go putz around and learn a new system? Probably not for what I'm needing right now.
Yeah, and there's a push right now. Probably haven't seen it yet because it just came out literally this morning. But ChatGPT is basically pushing chat into basically ChatGPT Classic, it's being called, and then basically trying to make their version of Cowork kind of a computer takeover method, basically that kind of agent. As one of the main agents, and it can run for hours now instead of minutes. And a lot of people have tested in the past. It was pretty slow and wasn't that great, but apparently some big improvements to it. So they're really pushing towards that, which a lot of the online response seems to be, that's a great way to use up a lot of tokens. Right. And chat is probably kind of a lost leader. So if they're trying to get more of that enterprise money, which right. I mean, they're financially very, very consumer based, unlike Claude, which is very enterprise based. They could be trying to push off some of that chat piece and try to get people more into the Cowork version. And Claude just had an update today that also pushes them more closely together, Cowork and chat. So I think,
which is showing up in Copilot, guys. I'm so excited. I asked for help rewriting an email, like just give me some formatting. And then yesterday, this is hot off the presses, Copilot was like, put this little module in the chat where I could send the email directly from Copilot. And I was like, yes, push the button. This is so great.
If your IT team has allowed it, it can also take over your screen or browser, same way that Claude can.
Or there's a little toggle that's like you can have chat or you can have Cowork on. And I actually haven't toggled the Cowork. This was just built into the chat functionality.
Oh, that's cool.
And so I got to check out the Cowork. Maybe that'll be a topic for our next section of like, how are we using Cowork? Do we like it? How does it compare across all these different things?
I wonder the day that we will soon have 2 laptops assigned to everybody, or virtual machines assigned to everybody, which is probably more likely, so that you can have your little bot do its thing, because it takes over your screen and your mouse. I mean, your mouse is moving around, so you can't really do anything except go to lunch.
You can go get a coffee. You can change your laundry because we're all working from home.
But productivity
stays constant.
See previous comments on focusing on the wrong thing.
Also previous comments on the rise of burnout for some reason. I don't know why, but it seems like tech workers are burning out really fast. I don't know why. We're just making them do 7 things at once versus 1.
Yeah. It's like the Lemmings game where they just walk off the ledge into the lava and they don't know why. They just keep doing it. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, what a cheery way to end on this last episode. Thank you for making it this far. As promised, this was a really interesting conversation. Thanks for sticking around and listening. Like, subscribe, share. Just go check out Pathways. Lots of new stuff there. Yeah, thanks. And we'll see you in the next 2 weeks in the next episode. Enterprising Minds. Take care.
Cheers, all.
Cheers.